And welcome. This is going to be a lore reading. I'm anticipating us having learned some interesting things in the last episode. Let's see. Codex creatures. What do we have here? Bronto. My character would already know about these. There's only two things a noble will step aside for: paragons and angry Brontos. Dwarven saying. This hulking beast was originally bred by the Dwarven Shaperate as a beast of burden and food source, the rough equivalent to surface oxen and cows. Some versions of Brontos have even been developed as Dwarven mounts, valued far more for their sure-footedness and stamina than their speed. Well, present within Orzammar in large numbers, some Brontos still exist in packs within the deep roads. What do they eat? Having returned to a wild state after the fall of the Dwarven kingdoms. I think they're probably more feral, but kind of question is whether and at what point they cease being feral and are just wild. Anyway, they require remarkably little sustenance, consuming organic materials from water, fungus, and even rocks, hence the rock liquor epithet used by many dwarves to describe Bronto. Okay, water in itself is not organic, and rocks aren't either, and exist in primarily dormant states until provoked. An angry charging Bronto is considered to be a rather dangerous opponent. Understandable. They look somewhat similar to... why am I blanking on this word? Rhinoceroses. Andraste, bride of the Maker. There was once a tiny fishing village on the waking sea that was set upon by the Tevinter Imperium, which enslaved the villagers to be sold in the markets of Minrathous, leaving behind only the old and the infirm. One of the captives was the child Andraste. She was raised in slavery in a foreign land. She escaped, then made the long and treacherous journey back to her homeland alone. She rose from nothing to be the wife of an Alamari warlord. I paused there because I've written a bit about fanfiction about Andraste, and I didn't know about that part. So I suppose it could happen after what I wrote, because I still have her being a child at that point. Each day she sang to the gods, asking them to help her people who remained slaves in Tevinter. The false gods of the mountains and the winds did not answer her, but the true god did. The Maker spoke. He showed her all the works of his hands, the Fade, the world, and all creatures therein. He showed her how men had forgotten him, lavish devotion on mute idols and demons, and how he had left them to their fate. But her voice had reached him, so captivated him that he offered her a place at his side, that she might rule all of creation. But Andraste would not forsake her people. She begged the Maker to return to save his children from the cruelty of the Imperium, who presumably are also his children. Reluctantly, the Maker agreed to give man another chance. Andraste went back to her husband, Mafarath, and told him all that the Maker had revealed to her. Together they rallied the Alamari and marched forth against the mage lords of the Imperium, and the Maker was with them. The Maker's sword was creation itself, fire and flood, famine and earthquake. Everywhere they went, Andraste sang to the people of the Maker, and they heard her. The ranks of Andraste's followers grew until there were a vast tide washing over the Imperium, and when Mafarath saw that the people loved Andraste and not him, a worm grew within his heart, gnawing upon it. At last the armies of Andraste and Mafarath stood before the very gates of Minrathous, but Andraste was not with them, for Mafarath had schemed in secret to hand Andraste over to Tevinter. For this, the Archon would give Mafarath all the lands to the south of the Waking Sea. And so, before all the armies of the Almari and the Tevinter, Andraste was tied to a stake and burned while her earthly husband turned his armies aside and did nothing, for his heart had been devoured. But as he watched the pyre, the Archon softened. He took pity on Andraste and drew his sword and granted her the mercy of a quick death. The Maker wept for his beloved, cursed Mafarath, and cursed mankind for their betrayal, and turned once again from his creation, taking only Andraste with him. And Our Lady sits still at his side, where she still urges him to take pity on his children from the sermons of Justinia II. feel like there's a previous description of Andraste being burned, which had her more like in a city center or square, which would be kind of difficult for the Mafroths and her armies to view it there, because they'd have to be then in the city. The Avars. Driven across the Frostbacks in ancient times, the Alamari tribesmen split into three groups. One settled the Ferelden Valley, one was pushed into the Kukari wilds, and the last returned to the mountains. Modern Fereldans bear little resemblance to their Alamari ancestors, and the chastened remember few of their traditions, but the Avars have changed little throughout the ages. Like the chastened, the Avars are not a united people. Each tribe fends for itself and is beholden only to its thane. And they still follow their old gods, Korth the Mountain Father, Hakon Winter's Breath, and the Lady of the Skies, as well as dozens of animal gods never named to outsiders. It's kind of weird formatting there. I feel like you might be able to fit Winter's Breath on there if you took out those large spaces. Nothing lasts in the mountains. Wind and rain eventually eat away the strongest holds. Valleys that were arable one generation are locked in year-round ice the next. Game is constantly on the move. Even among themselves, the Avar make no absolute promises. They wed by a tradition in which the groom struggles to untie a tightly knotted rope, while the bride sings a hymn to one of the gods. However many knots he has undone by the time her song ends is the number of years she will spend with him. Lowlanders often forget that there is no such thing as a permanent alliance in the Frostbacks. From Ferelden Folklore and History by Sister Petrine, Chantry Scholar. I mean, winds and rain kind of eat away at everything. There's a reason why we have to keep replacing buildings. It's because they wear out. Yeah, marriages do end. I mean, frequently in these times, they probably end by death. But in any case, what's next? The Old Gods. Dumont, the Dragon of Silence, Zazakil, the Dragon of Chaos, Toth, the Dragon of Fire, Andoril, the Dragon of Slaves, Urthamiel, the Dragon of Beauty, Razakael, the Dragon of Mystery, Lusakan, the Dragon of Night. There were 7 old gods, great winged dragons, that were said to rule over the ancient world. The Chantry maintains that they are responsible for the original sin, that they turned humanity away from its true creator through deceit. Humanity's faith faltered unless the Maker turned away from the world, but not before trapping the old gods in eternal prisons beneath the earth as punishment. Scholars assume that the old gods must indeed have been real at one point, but most agree that they were likely actual dragons, ancient high dragons of a magnitude not known today, and impressive enough to frighten ancient peoples into worshipping them. Some even claim that these dragons slumber in a form of hibernation, not as a result of the Maker's wrath. Regardless of the truth, the legend maintains that even from their underground prisons, the old gods were able to whisper into the minds of men. The Archon Thalasian, the first of the magisters who claimed to have contact with the old god Dumont, used the blood magic. Dumont taught him to attain incredible power in Tevinter and declare himself ruler of an empire. In return, he established the first temples worshipping the old gods, and the dragons became equated everywhere with imperial power. To date, 4 old gods are said to have risen as corrupted archdemons. Dumont, the first and most powerful, was slain at the Battle of Silent Fields. Zazakil fell at the Battle of Starkhaven. Toth died at the Battle of Hunter Fell. Andoril was felled by Karahel, the legendary Grey Warden, at the Battle of Aisley. The archdemons have been identified only after years of argument among scholars, and to this day is unclear whether the archdemons were truly old gods and not simply dragons. All that is known is that the Darkspawn hunt for them in deep underground. If they are truly the old gods, as many scholars believe, then we will only have 3 bloods remaining. When all the old gods have risen and been slain, however, What will happen? Will the blights end forever, and humanity earn forgiveness from the Maker at last? We shall see. From the Old Gods Rise Again by Sister Mary, Chapter Scholar, 850 Blessed. Yeah, that's was my impression that there wasn't really a good reason for deciding that the archdemons were actually old gods. I mean, certainly they emerged from underground, but I mean, what's the difference between that and, a dragon catching the blight? And I don't know. Brother Ferdinand Genitivi. I wonder if he's not actually Ferelden, because the name does not seem Ferelden. My impression is Ferelden's kind of equivalent to England. Genitivi seems more Italian, which I think is Rouvain and Antiva. Potentially also the Imperium, but also feel like Imperium is more Roman, updated in the Middle Ages, maybe Byzantine. As it is the duty of all true sons of the chantry to make the chant heard from every corner of the world, I made it my mission to find as many corners of the world as possible. The Maker can hardly expect us to do one without the other. From excerpt from In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genitivi. Brother Genitivi is one of the chantry's most well-known scholars. It is primarily on the basis of the stories he has published, which many of his contemporaries dismiss as fanciful, of his travels across the lengths and breadths of Thedas. His travels, and rather too curious nature, led him to a study of folklore, which gave him the notion that he could track down that most debated of all artifacts, the Urn of Sacred Ashes. He announced that he had found what appeared to be the trail of the urn, left in the legends of the regions through which it had passed from Andraste on its way into hiding. He appears to have been right. The final resting place of Andraste lay at the summit of a remote mountain. The Holy Brazier. The brazier that stands atop the stairs of the great hall of our temple has always been something of a mystery to us. This is the brazier that created the beings we call the Ash Wraiths. This is where Andraste's followers immolated themselves and became the eternal guardians of her temple. I have painstakingly pieced together information from old books and from tales and half-truths passed down to us by our forefathers. I believe I now understand the ritual used to create the wraiths. The brazier was lit with a consecrated taper, its flame taken from the everlasting fire that long ago consumed Andraste herself. The chosen disciple would fast and pray for weeks, taking into his body nothing but a sip of water a day. When the disciple was finally ready, he would place in his mouth a flawless black pearl and step into the flames. In ancient Demeter, black pearls were thought to be magical, able to stop the soul from passing through the veil when held in the mouth at the moment of death. Thus, Andraste's disciples consigned themselves to the eternal flame. They became dust and ashes, rose again and again to protect the most beloved of the Maker. From the Journal of Father Colgrim. I believe I have one of those. I'm not sure if there's anything else you can do with that. I'll have to look into that. Death of a Templar. The dry, dusty earth swallows up salty drops that spatter on its surface. A tiny insect pauses, sensing vibrations, and scurries off, leaving behind its invisible enemy. As the drops fall, the dark circles merge together, expressing a mirror to their creator. The primal emotions of bloodlust and sorrow blend into a lethal cocktail that breaks the strongest of men. The jurisdiction of strength must be left to the spirit, not arm nor chest. Only the wisest turn to his inner sanctuary to partition the mind from the all-consuming madness. Seductive voices whisper the promise of glory, weighting down the weaker path of the flesh, bringing a death far worse than that of hot lead or steel. Hot lead? Why would in the Middle Ages you associate hot lead with death? These blank hollow promises will echo the unfathomable eternally. Which is to say, I think that's an anachronism. Living comfortably amongst material possessions, it is easy to misunderstand the true meaning of uncontrollable hate. Failing to understand the power of fighting against pure, unfaltering beliefs and against foes that listen only to their soul, uncontrollable hate, influenced and thus removed from innocence, the scar is permanent and internal. The rain, now red, feeds the debt owed for actions past, seeking further into the earth as the mind drains slower. What was it that drew himself to this situation? The mind ebbs and parts to a lingering memory of true innocence. He entered war as a newborn enters the world, unknown of both the horrors and light of the Maker that will save him. The sound of metal sliding across leather comes from above him. From the second he was born to his soon-to-be dying breath, his mind was processing and analyzing knowledge and experiences. It is true that he thought he could be wise in his own eyes, but only the most humble recognizes that he knows very little. Biases, speculation, and all the false pretenses make way to the sound of the sweeping steel, and then finally his soul, as ready as his eyes dry from this final understanding, enters his promise of its purest form. From the Death of a Templar by Sir Andrew, Knight of Andraste and Templar Archivist, 9-4 Dragon. That was kind of weird. Sermons of Divine Renata. The weakness of mortal will is the great failing of all the Maker's children. We trade honor as if it were the cheapest of currencies. We do not understand what integrity is or what it is truly worth. From this ignorance, original sin was born. At some time, each of us has thought, what does it matter if I keep hold of my integrity? I am but one mortal. I am powerless. How blind we all are. The virtue of a single slave destroyed the Devinter Imperium. The dishonor of one man drove the Maker from our sight. I tell you truly, nothing but the integrity of our hearts will win the love of the Maker back to us. It is all the power we shall ever possess to change this world for good or for ill. From a sermon on integrity. Notes. What do we have? Correspondence Instructress. Let's see. Delicate matter. I think it's this one. Darling, when we next meet, I would find it agreeable for you to leave your hat on, and maybe your boots as well, and trousers, and shirt too. And I shall facilitate said clothed status by locking my door and posting a guard. Duly warned? I think that's a no. Alright, quest related. What's this? And the writers follow after every town ever since my lucky break deciphering the story. I see it now how they take the locals closest to me, preventing rest or kinship. I thought this a road to glory, and I am dogged by every step by his talons. Gaxkang, curse his name, and the day I ever heard it. Journal from Exeter, unnamed long-dead adventurer. You asked, so I'm telling. Don't go. The stories talk of the riches, but never the names, never where they supposedly spent their wealth. I heard the same tales as a lad in Denerim, felt the same pull, but it's a lie, son. They may paint a trail, but once you're on it, does it lead to the beast or back to you? Outside letter, father to son. Let's see. once you have come to ascend, have tasted sweet nectar, did demonic blessing rise anew, ascended as a god through the connection between earth and sky, flesh and dream, blood and memory, you have risen above the petty concerns of the chantry and her minions, past the notice of a secular nobles and their petty squabbles, through rituals inscribed in these scrolls, you have mastered the minds of others, braved temptations of the fade, and quashed the turmoil of demons. Let no murder or theft weigh upon your mind, as your will is absolute and the world is yours to claim. I think that's the newest one. And that's it. That's all for this one. Thank you for watching, do any relevant things with YouTube's buttons, and have a nice day.